Our industry is grappling with uncertainty. At the 2025 National Restaurant Association Show, you'll explore innovative solutions, strategies, and partnerships that will prepare you for whatever comes your way. Take it from me, the show has everything you need to elevate your front and back of house. You'll see, touch, taste, and demo the latest trending products across more than 900 categories, including food, beverage, technology, equipment, and more. Don't miss the industry's most trusted event taking place in Chicago, May 17th to 20th. Secure a badge by May 9th to save $30. Register today at nationalrestaurantshow.com. Rate quoted ends on May 9th and applies to operators only. Non-exhibiting suppliers are subject to a higher badge rate. Please check out the show's website.
How do you teach an old pizza chain new tricks? Hello, this is Jonathan Mays, editor-in-chief of Restaurant Business, and in this week's episode of A Deeper Dive, we check in with Sbarro CEO David Karam. You've probably heard of Sbarro. It was founded in Brooklyn in 1956 and for years thrived in mall locations. It had some struggles years ago, but it has been growing again and recently opened its 800th location. So we thought we would bring David along to see how things are going, how the brand has changed, and how it's adapting to a new reality. David, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jonathan. It's great to be with you.
All right. So what's going on in Sbarro world?
Just more of the same. We've been, we've crafted kind of a strategy that enabled us to get the brand growing again, probably over the past 7 years. And we're disrupted quite a bit by COVID, but have kind of kept our heads down and just driven execution, since we kind of, cracked the code, if you will.
Okay. Well, what code did you crack? Tell me about that. What do you mean by that?
I started with Sbarro as a board member in 2012 and then took over as CEO about a year later. And the brand had a number of struggles. It had been owned by private equity for a while. And so, kind of had become heavily indebted, hadn't really crafted, a growth strategy beyond the malls. And, by then we all know what was happening with e-commerce and the oversaturation of malls in America. So when I came in, it was a challenging situation. It was kind of a tired brand. We had to take it through a second restructuring just because it was, struggling under a massive burden of debt. And, we really struggled to figure out how do we grow this brand again? Because at the time they considered themselves an Italian eatery. We did a lot of consumer research. The recognition of the brand was phenomenal. But what people really knew Sbarro's for was pizza, New York style pizza, and specifically pizza by the slice. I kind of figured that's a pretty good place to call home. The pizza segment, as I'm sure you know, is the third biggest segment in the industry domestically. But what's interesting, it's also the third biggest segment in almost every market around the globe. And we had a niche not only with authentic New York style pizza, but also with pizza by the slice. So it was, as I said, it took us a couple of years. We struggled with some initiatives that just didn't work. But I would say by 2016, 2017, that was kind of a, cathartic moment. And we recrafted our brand position. That brand position is that Sbarro is the leading quick serve restaurant brand serving what we call the impulse pizza occasion. We specialize in New York style pizza by the slice and stromboli that both creates and satiates customers' pizza cravings. And so what's baked into that is a recognition that pizza by the slice is kind of our it. It's the segment in the market that we really historically have dominated, and by far we're the biggest player in that space today. And we create the craving, and that's an acknowledgement that we're kind of equal parts restaurant and retailer. So the merchandising element is exceptionally important to us. Once I kind of reassembled the team with that revised brand position, we went through it in great detail, refined it a bit, and recognized that that is really who we are. And so then the challenge was, okay, if that's who we are, where can we put restaurants like this? And at the time, we were primarily malls and airports. Well, at the time, there was 1,200 malls in America. There might be 100 airports. And it just didn't give us much of a growth opportunity. And we talked about convenience stores and the growth in QSR there, and travel centers or truck stops, and universities and casinos and military bases, and just a plethora of different venues. And so from, 2017 to today, we're playing in categories, we still open in malls, we want to be in malls, but malls globally are only about 25% of our growth. The bulk of our growth is in convenience stores and travel centers and military bases, colleges, hospital food courts. So it's different business today. And as a result, we're achieving record levels of new store development. Last 3 years, we've had over 100 stores a year. And this year, we expect to open 140 to 150 restaurants globally. So we've been very lucky and very fortunate. The team's worked very hard, and we've got some great franchise partners. The other thing I will tell you is, and most of my experience was in the QSR hamburger segment. And, with pizza and with our concept, it plays well in almost every market around the world. We're in 32 markets around the world. We've opened up 2 to 3 new countries per year for each of the last 3 years, and the numbers perform well. So it's a concept that works globally. And we continue to craft not only initiatives that solidify our strength in this segment that we feel we dominate in, this impulse occasion, which is kind of like a bakery, if you will. But once third-party delivery apps emerged in 2015, 2016, Jonathan, we jumped on that because we knew that that was kind of our pathway into the mainstream QSR pizza segment, because we saw it as an opportunity to offer the convenience of delivery or even carry out in a way that didn't require us to build that infrastructure internally. And so that's been by far the fastest growing segment of our business today. And in some of the venues that I talked about, like convenience stores, it's a critically important piece. It's 25+% of our mix.
Mm-hmm. Where's the 800th location at? Tell me about that one.
It's funny. Last week we opened 4 restaurants globally, and we basically worked with all of those new store openings to say, listen, we're not, because you can't determine exactly when and where each one opened. We kind of did a press release with all of the above. So we opened a store on a military base in Kentucky, at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. We opened a mall location in California. We opened a convenience store in Oklahoma and a convenience store in the United Kingdom. So we'll let them fight over who got the 800th. But I will tell you, yesterday we opened our 801st, and that was a company-owned store at a mall in Maryland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the numbers, and it seems like you've been doing okay in the United States. I don't need to tell you that it's not really easy for brands to recover from a bankruptcy, let alone two, but to have managed to grow what you've done, both in the United States and internationally. That's not easy to do. I can tell you, very, very, very few brands can say that have filed for that have gone Chapter 22 like that. It just doesn't happen. So what was it? Is it just the fact that you were able to get debt? That you just kind of figured out that niche? Which one is key, or is it both?
I think it's all the above. If I were to say what was the one critical piece, it was the brand positioning. Reestablishing the brand positioning was, it was just a monumental moment for us as a brand, both on the company and the franchise side. It gave us a much, and I always tell people that brand turnarounds, they don't work very often. You're right. And not only brands that have to turn around themselves from a 1 or even 2 Chapter 11 filings, but even those that don't have to go through that restructuring. When it does work, in my opinion, it typically is where you tighten the brand position. So Sbarro, as I said, was considered a Italian eatery with a kind of a wide offering of Italian food as well as pizza in Stromboli. And we still embrace that broader menu, but we do adapt the menu to the venue. So if we're going into a convenience store, every store has New York style pizza and Stromboli. That's a given. That is the kind of the cornerstone of our brand. And then with stores that are in higher volume locations, we will broaden that menu to, embrace the, spaghetti and meatballs or the baked ziti or lasagna or salads and, even some of the chicken protein dishes. So it's not like we shed that, but we did tighten the positioning around the core of the menu that consumers knew. And we used that as a catalyst to be able to regenerate growth. So that change in the brand position was really critical. The other components, are just a vicious approach to operational execution. So once we identified the positioning and understood how important, for instance, merchandising was, we just continued to drive heightened levels of execution. We identified what was critical in those, to perform to achieve that brand position. And then we measured it and drove the execution both in company stores as well as in franchise stores. So operational execution, really, really key. The food quality, absolutely central. So what I try to do, whether my time running Wendy's or my time running Sbarro, has been to identify a big segment of the industry. QSR pizza is obviously a very big segment. And then we want to play in the premium quality end. Not to say that value isn't important and we don't have to be price sensitive for the consumers, but we can't lead on price. We're never going to win that game. And so what we want to do, is to position ourselves as the premium quality player. Now, I understand the legacy and the kind of the ridicule that Sbarro faced with its deteriorating performance over decades and the bankruptcies. We can't change those perceptions around overnight, but we have worked just judiciously and consistently to constantly upgrade the quality. So everything we make is fresh. We make the dough fresh. We shred the cheese. It's 100% whole milk mozzarella cheese. We've increased the portioning. We shred the cheese fresh every day in every store, shred the vegetables. So we're a big believer that over time, that quality positioning is where we want to hang our hat. And that's our North Star. So, it's positioning for the brand, it's operational execution, it's ensuring that we have the quality to deliver. And then finally, we have to make good returns on invested capital. So our concept can deliver some really impressive returns on invested capital. We seek to get, our investments back in 3 years. And we want that for not only company stores, but for franchise stores too. It's this kind of solid foundation that we built the business on. And I'm proud to tell you that we basically have deleveraged the company entirely. We have a debt to EBITDA ratio of less than 1 year, 1-to-1, and when I started, it was probably 150 to 1. So, shedding a lot of that debt through bankruptcy was helpful, very, very helpful. But we did a lot of other things, whether it's in repositioning where we operated stores or renegotiating leases and such, and then just drive in the franchise side of this business. So God willing, we've got a very bright future. We're very proud of where we've kind of gotten to. And our hope is just to keep our heads down. And, hopefully I have a chance to pass it on to the next generation of family members and just continue to kind of, manage the brand for the long run.
Tell me this. I'm dying to ask you this question. When you first saw how much debt that they had, what was your reaction? What do you think?
I took over as a CEO in March. As I said, I had been on the board, but, just like the other board members who were all the private equity guys and were the debt holders, none of us really had a sense because we had just emerged from bankruptcy less than 12 months earlier. So none of us really knew the numbers. I took over in March of 2013. Our first board meeting, this is when we were headquartered in New York, was in April of 2013. So 1 month later. And I immediately said, listen, guys, we're going to have to take this through a second restructuring. I had great partners, Apollo, Guggenheim, Babson, Fort Hill Capital, just great, great partners. And I teased them jokingly, not seriously, but jokingly after the fact that I said, that was the meeting where you guys threw your pencils at me because they were adamant. They said, that is not going to happen, Dave. But you know what? By October, they agreed. were 100% supportive. And then they played on the other side, the equity side, as we cut the business, turned around and grew it again.
Yeah. So like one of the things that I find fascinating here to me is that and it's sort of a theme that I have lately is that brands make big mistakes by trying to be something they're not. You get a lot of brands that start getting distracted by, or, they try to do, their X and they try to do Y. I don't think the consumer wants you to do these things. You are who you are in this business. And very, very few brands can successfully do that. And if you're going to be able to do that, you just really, everything else has to be working phenomenally. And I think brands start getting into trouble and they see that, oh my gosh, this is happening over here. We need to do something completely radically different. But the consumer doesn't, I mean, I've always felt Sbarro was a pizza by the slicing or Stromboli. I mean, like always there,
Yeah.
right? You know what I mean? And that's what you go to. I mean, you have opportunity certainly these days, but I mean, that's who you are.
You are 100% right. And I would say there's another piece of where they make mistakes, but let me speak to what you're saying first. I've run 3 companies in my life, and that was our family-owned franchise, which became a very, very large franchise restaurant company within the Wendy's system, Wendy's International, and then Sbarro. And I've always applied 4 fundamental principles to management. Number 1 is brand position. You have to know where home is. And so to your point, I always say there's just 3 qualities I look for in the right brand position. Number 1, it has to be authentic to your heritage. I always like to say you can't have been a zebra all your life and say, tomorrow I'm going to be a horse. You have to have a brand position that's authentic and believable to your heritage. Secondly, it has to be a defendable position in the marketplace. And third, it has to be a spot that allows you to grow at an above industry average rate, which means you'll gain share, correct? Those are the 3 fundamental, simple qualities to an effective brand position. And I think when we reposition our brand, we knocked off each one of those 3. The second principle then is, if that's where home is, then what are the critical factors that I have to perform well in order to move the business there? And I just bifurcate them to consumer-facing and enablers. Enablers would be, you got to develop the brand. You have to apply technology. You have to have food safety in place. You have to make money. You have to have good returns on invested capital, because all those things are critically important, right? And on the consumer facing, it's the operational execution. The menu has to fit the brand position, the expression of the brand, whether it's in advertising or store design or, uniforms, and all the merchandising has to fit. So there are other pieces there, but those are the critical success factors. The third principle, and I'm a CPA, that's kind of where I started my career, but I'm a big believer in this industry that performance measurement is critical. So the third principle is, if you know where home is, the brand position, you know what's critical to getting you there, you got to measure everything you deem critical. You have to measure it. Some things are a hell of a lot harder to measure than others, like operational execution or employee attitudes, right? But they have to be measured. And those measurements have to have 3 simple qualities. They have to be timely. They have to be valid, because you would be shocked how many times big companies are measuring something that they think measures an important performance area, but it's not a valid measure. And it has to be efficient. You can't spend more on the measurement system itself than its value is. I mean, I always tell people, if I want to measure restaurant operations the best, guess what I'm going to do? I am going to stand open to close at the point of sale and watch every transaction. That's going to be a great way to measure performance. But is it an efficient way? I'll never get beyond 1 store. And then the fourth thing is, you have to drive heightened execution against all these performance metrics. And it has to be systemically, just on a way of life. And we've crafted monthly business reviews at Cedar Enterprises and carried it over to Wendy's and now Sbarro. And that becomes not only the cornerstone for driving performance improvement, but for developing talent and sharing the culture and the vision and the initiatives in the organization. Those are the fundamentals that we stick with. It's blocking and tackling, quite frankly. The other dimension, aside from the one that you mentioned, where brands try to be something that they're not, is so many brands in this industry are owned by financial owners, and their time horizon is different. If you look at the best brands in this industry, in many cases, maybe not all, but many, they're privately owned and, quite frankly, family owned. You know, you look at the Chick-fil-A's or the Raising Cane's or the In-N-Outs of the industry, and they're managing the business for the long run. This is now a family-owned business, and I've been able to buy out all the private equity guys, and so we're just kind of settling in for the long haul. God willing, my 3 sons all work here in the company in different areas, and my message to them is just manage the business in a way that keeps an eye on your grandchildren, okay? That's the key, because that's what customers and employees and franchisees and vendors want. And I think that if you do that, it's a great industry. I love the industry,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it's fantastic. I love that. You manage the brand for your grandchildren. I think that's fantastic. So you you must just love being the brand owner at this particular point.
Look, I'm not going to sit there and tell you it wasn't incredibly challenging, and it was. And it was not a solo act by any stretch of the imagination. I've had less to do with it than most others. It's been a team effort. But, I communicate once or twice a week with all of our system, company, franchised, globally. Probably an email that goes out to 2,000 people. And it is so important to communicate broadly and to help people understand that longer vision. But one of the things that I'm always compelling them to do is drive performance stronger in your franchise stores. And I spent quite a bit of time on this email talking about certain key initiatives, particularly the people one. So I'm proud of the fact that last year we had our lowest turnover in my 40 years in this industry. We had 90% crew turnover in our 150 company-owned restaurants last year. And we have average general manager tenure that's the highest I've ever seen in my businesses that I've run, just under 8 years per manager for 150 managers. And we just had our company operations conference 2 weeks ago here in Columbus. And of the 60 people that are multi-unit field people in company and franchise domestic operations, average tenure was 17 years. So it's a people business. We all hear that all the time, but that's the reality. That is the reality. So it's about team building. It's about creating a culture and a vision, and then getting everybody rowing in the same direction. So
you're awesome. David, this was fantastic. Really appreciate you joining me on this week's podcast.
Thanks for the invitation, Jonathan. It's great to see you again.
Yeah. And that should do it for this week's episode of A Deeper Dive, which was edited, as always, by Spoons. Artwork by Nico Hines. You may find this and other episodes of the podcast on our website at www.restaurantbusinessonline.com/article/deeper-dive. And you may subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I'm Jonathan Mays, your host, podcast producer, and the editor-in-chief of Restaurant Business. Thank you for listening.
Our industry is grappling with uncertainty. At the 2025 National Restaurant Association Show, you'll explore innovative solutions, strategies, and partnerships that will prepare you for whatever comes your way. Take it from me, the show has everything you need to elevate your front and back of house. You'll see, touch, taste, and demo the latest trending products across more than 900 categories, including food, beverage, technology, equipment, and more. Don't miss the industry's most trusted event taking place in Chicago, May 17th to 20th. Secure a badge by May 9th to save $30. Register today at nationalrestaurantshow.com. Rate quoted ends on May 9th and applies to operators only. Non-exhibiting suppliers are subject to a higher badge rate. Please check out the show's website.